Hey everybody, Watch This Review here with yet another segment, my award-winning It Came From Another World series. Tonight I'll be looking at Onslaught from the Marvel Legends Onslaught wave. He was the Build-A-Figure. It was an all-villain wave. It was wave 13 of the Toy Biz. And he consists of 6 pieces. Or the pieces came with 6 figures, which was the lower torso and the shell thing back here. Arms were separate, legs were separate, and the upper torso was separate. For people not familiar with the character of Onslaught, I do believe I've seen a few questions about Onslaught in other places. He appeared basically in a one-shot comic series. It's actually a pretty long story, but at one point Wolverine ticks off Magneto to the extent that Magneto decides to rip the adamantium right out of Wolverine's body. So he does that, he nearly kills Wolverine, and then, Professor X loses it and decides to shut down Magneto's mind by force. Just like give him a total mind wipe or whatever. Now when he does that, some of the crazy from Magneto somehow gets into Professor X's head, which is represented in a psionic level by this little thing that looks like a, I don't know, like a sliver if you've ever played Magic the Gathering, or Xenomorph if you're familiar with the Alien series, or a how do you call those things? Zerg if you're familiar with StarCraft. But yeah, it looks more like a sliver than anything else. Actually, I'm looking at the screen right now and it looks like the colors are too bright. I mean, the figure's paint job's actually a lot duller than when you see it. I think it's just the reflection here, so I'm turning on my other light. Yeah, that should dampen the color a bit. It's like a dark crimson color for the body paint, then a really deep royal purple for the other stuff. Basically solid tones. Continuing on with the story, the entity or whatever that was in Magneto's mind at one point infects Xavier, and Xavier begins to do stuff that he's not aware of. Like he goes to a Sentinel base and he steals the plans for Sentinels and so forth. And then, of course, he ends up eventually getting confronted, and then Xavier / Onslaught starts to lay out the team and so forth. And eventually, while he's on the psionic plane, Xavier's / Onslaught's form is pulled off the psionic plane, so it means literally in another plane of existence, and this thing becomes a physical entity, which basically starts off looking like just a really kick-ass looking version of Magneto. If you've ever played Marvel vs. Capcom 1, you know what he looks like, or I'll toss a Wikipedia link or something in there, but he just looks like a crazy pimped up version of Magneto, and they actually had a figure release for that in the 90s, where you could actually attach additional armor on to get this sort of look. But eventually everybody fights. He takes all these Sentinels, they take over New York, and then the hero, the X-Men, the Avengers, Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom, everybody who's anybody basically assembles to stop him. Thor punches through him to pull Xavier out of his body, yet for some reason he still exists. A completely separate entity. Then his shell gets cracked at some point by a fully powered up Hulk after Hulk's restraints and so forth are removed. Hulk passes out immediately after, but he manages to put a crack in the armor and so forth. And then I think that's when this version appeared, but I can't really remember when he started to look really crazy, but it's been so long. I've only really read the storyline once, but eventually they shatter through the armor and so forth all together, and then it's just a psionic being, and then all the heroes that aren't mutants rush in there to disrupt his psionic body, and then all the heroes vanish for a year except for the X-Men into some pocket dimension. But he's got all sorts of crazy powers. He's got levitation, he's got what do you call that, telekinesis, magnetism, telepathy, reality warping thanks to the characters he absorbed, and just a whole slew, like every power imaginable. As for the figure, not a ton of articulation, but I mean the character himself wouldn't really have needed the articulation, but you're looking at all the fingers are individually articulated, all 6 of them, including the 2 thumbs. The wrist is articulate. Goes up and down a little bit. Let me just get a close-up of the face here. So I know that I haven't been doing a lot of close-ups lately, and I do apologize for that. Also, he's 9.5 inches tall at full height. I'll bring in a figure at the end for scale comparison. But the forearm does twist. See? It's twisting. And of course, he's got a single joint elbow, looks like. It's a pin joint. Bicep joint, and of course his normal shoulder will move. And this of course is just a soft verbally plastic, so it doesn't really get in the way. Head can't really move. I mean, it'll move side to side a bit, but actually you can pull it out. I didn't realize you could pull it out a little bit, but ab/diaphragm joint, obviously. Leg moves at hip. I mean, it's got one of those things in there to modulate the weight, and he's an incredibly top-heavy figure, so no matter what, he's going to be sort of tough to pose. Double-jointed knee. Actually, it's a single joint, sorry. Looked like a double joint because of the plating here, but it's just a single pin joint. And another joint down here. I don't know what you'd really call that. And then of course the foot, it's a ball joint, so the foot can move. Got the figure pretty cheap. It was under 20 bucks, including shipping and handling, I think. Loose. Fairly satisfied with him. I mean, he's a pretty cool looking figure. You just can't do a ton with him, and he's tough to pose because he's so top heavy. So let me just toss in some other figures, something on scale. Here we go. First appearance, Spider-Man from the Sentinel series. As you can see, he's up to the crotch plate. Then we have Wendigo here from the Fin Fan Foom series, who's wow. But yeah, this is a pretty big figure, so that doesn't really mean anything. Cyclops from Sentinel series. This is a 6.5 inch figure, or about, so you know, it gives you a realistic expectation of what, you know, you'll, if you're displaying him against certain figures. But all in all, just incredibly cool character. He stopped the unstoppable Juggernaut, flicked him and sent him flying like halfway across the world. I believe he could probably also move the supposedly immovable blob, so you know, this guy's a force of nature. You can get him a bunch of decent poses. I usually have his palms posed up like this or something. Kind of like a shrugging position at times, but I usually like toss something in his hands, or I don't know. Actually, looks like he's playing the guitar. Except for I think the hands are reversed. If yeah, I think the hands would be reversed in that case. But yeah, all in all, pretty cool figure. It was a really decent wave. You know, if you find him cheap, I would recommend picking him up. If not, you know, even that wave is fairly cheap except for the Green Goblin, and also I think the Abomination, but like almost every figure in that wave is worth owning. You know, let's just watch this review here, and with a look at the Onslaught Build-A-Figure from the Series 13 Marvel Legends Toy Biz series.